Luke, good to see you. So if you don't know Luke, as many members of your first scholarship knows, our recruiting coach, good friend of mine, played with me at junior college, played at the Division II level, also coached the collegiate level. How you doing, Luke? I know you're over there
Good,
in
man. How
Michigan
you
having a good
doing?
time.
Yeah, thanks
Doing
for having
well,
me on.
doing well. Yeah, yeah, for sure, man. So yeah, tell everybody a little bit about your story, your football career, your journey, because obviously it's unique. Yeah, go into it, man.
Cool. Yeah. No, I appreciate it. Yeah, just some background on me. I'm from small town, Kalamazoo, Michigan, Southwest Michigan. I didn't even really know that I was able to play football in college. That wasn't really presented to me, at a younger age. So I got to it pretty late. It wasn't till, after my junior season where I really started, going out and trying to get recruited. My head coach just kind of called me on the phone and told me I could play, and then just started having coaches come to my school and visit me. And then after that, I wasn't big on the school side of things for my first 2.5 semesters because I didn't know I could play college football. I just figured I'd go to a community college in town. But after that, I started going to camps, sending out emails as much as I could, getting in contact with coaches, and then I ended up having to take the junior college route. Went to a school in North Dakota for a semester, and then COVID happened. Some things changed, and then I ended up meeting Trenton out at Santa Barbara City College. Played a couple years there, or just 1 year. Met a lot of good people, and then ended up getting a scholarship. Going to Quincy University in Illinois, where I played a couple years there. So yeah, so ended up getting a scholarship. Ended up being a good experience for me.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, man. And I think there's definitely a lot of things that you left out there when you talk about, obviously you went to North Dakota Botano, uh, program shuts down,
Yeah.
which also the program, I mean, I'm sure they were trying to run it the best they could, but it sounded like it was also a little bit of a mess, which can happen at the junior college level.
Yeah, to say the least.
Yeah, yeah. And then obviously when you transferred to Santa Barbara, it was during COVID.
Hmm.
So when you say like I played there for a couple of years, and then you're like, oh, only 1 year, like you were there for 2 years and only played 1 year.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a lot. And then obviously you had that unfortunate injury, which I'd love for you to go more into that because obviously that's a huge part of your story that you were still able to get that scholarship even though um, you know you had that significant injury, which is just I think it's one of the coolest stories in my book. Of course, you were my roommate, and I was sharing a room with you one of the times, so
Yeah.
I
True.
got to definitely see that firsthand. Um, yeah, man, I guess definitely had a very unique path and one that, a lot of us at JUCO, to be fair, had unique paths all over the place. Like there's a lot of
Yeah.
unique stories. I talked to Alex yesterday, which obviously Alex very well. Uh, but he had a unique story too, where he went from a D3 to Santa Barbara, and then obviously he ended up at Washington, and now he's at Tiffin. So he went through the ringer too. But um, yeah, I don't know what part you want to start at that might give people more insight into kind of like what can even happen and how the crazy routes go down. Because yeah, I mean you hit on it too. On like, I mean, I'm sure you aren't a fan of saying it, but like you kind of messed up on the grades part, which
Yep.
is it's a thing that happens, and you're
Yeah.
super aware of that. Of like, hey, I messed up on that. I wish I wouldn't have made that mistake. And I think it's so important. I was fortunate enough that I took my care of my grades early enough and I realized it. But it's easy to like not realize that too, and definitely try to share that as much as possible. So
Yeah, yeah, that is kind of funny. I skipped over the pretty much the most important part of my life, which is figuring out my
yeah,
E.
you made it look really easy, saved all the climaxes. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, come on,
yeah,
man.
yeah. Just skipped over the most important part. But yeah, so second year at JUCO, I don't know, people listening in know really what that means. Like, you're in your second year, you can only play 2 years of junior college ball. If you don't get a scholarship after that year, you're pretty much just done with football. So having that season end, and I was sick. I missed a game. I had a hurt shoulder. I missed another game. So then at the end of the season, after all that, I was still getting a good amount of recruitment from some pretty good schools, like some FCS D1s, and then some like more higher tier D2 schools. And then at the end of the season, I totally completely tear my ACL. end my season, lost all my recruitment. I had a D1 coach call me on the phone, offer me on the phone, told me I had an NFL comeback route, and then he didn't know that I had a blown out knee. Told him on the phone, and then he just ghosted me after that. So that was definitely a reckoning in my life. Had to take a year off. Thankfully, I'm kind of smart, so the coaches let me, be a coach on the team, and I had like real responsibilities. I wasn't just like a pity coach. I was up there, in the box, talking to Coach Marop, helping him with the play calls, calling out defense and stuff like that. That was a really good experience for me, just to kind of see too if I really wanted to be a football coach. It was a good, first experience. Um, and then, through all that, just going through PT and everything, doing a lot of the strategies that, we do at Year First Scholarship, with, the exposure machine type of things. I was doing it manually, but doing all those things, trying to get my name out there as much as possible. Coach Aiden, our, junior college coach, is helping me out a lot with that. And then thankfully, Quincy University came out. They were interested in me, talked to him on the phone, did a workout in front of their head coach and tight ends coach just out in a random field in Santa Barbara, and they ended up offering me a scholarship and covered all my tuition. So it ended up being a great thing for me.
Yeah, that's the best part. That you just, the most random thing people would be like, "There's no way that's." I don't even know if like that's in recruiting rules or not. I don't even know how that works, like recruiting wise, but
Yeah,
it
I
works.
don't either. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy that all played out how it did, which is just it's just awesome. Yeah, and you made a really good point of like obviously again it's funny just because like I got to talk to Alex yesterday, but like a lot of the stuff that I preach and that I talk about is like stuff that we did while we were in Santa Barbara or stuff that I did while I was in high school and stuff that to be fair, you being a recruiting coach in your first scholarship, I always feel very confident in just like having you as an extension of what we do because we would talk about it all the time. Like we would talk about it all the time of like what was going on with
Yeah,
coaches, how to talk to coaches.
that was all we could talk
Like,
about. Mhm.
yeah, I mean, it was our goal, obviously, is like to go play college football at the next level. And so, of course, we talked about that all the
Mhm.
time. Also, we had no space in our apartment, so we couldn't ignore each other all day. But
Yeah.
yeah, and again, like you said with Aiden, like obviously Aiden was very important in that process too. Of like he would tell us certain things of like kind of what coaches were thinking or what they were specifically saying, and kind of how to position ourselves correctly in those things to maximize opportunities. I think like I don't want to talk about Coach Aiden forever, but he's an awesome guy and
Mhm.
like definitely gave us a lot of pointers
Yeah.
for certain stuff that helped out a ton and definitely reshaped the ways that I think about recruiting or obviously not just recruiting but a ton of things. So definitely agree with you there. I guess with that, like what were I mean, like you talked about like getting ghosted by a coach and like talking to coaches and kind of going through the process. Like, what was I guess some of the things about the recruiting process that you felt like you learned throughout your time doing it?
Really just being able to humbly sell yourself in a way. It's kind of a fine line. A coach wants a guy who's really confident about themselves, but they don't really want someone who's just a me guy, someone who's really cocky. Um, you know, for me, I wasn't always the best just at talking to people or like talking to someone in a position of power where, I kind of need to get to, if that makes sense. Like, a teacher, coach, anything like that, like your boss at work. That just wasn't a skill that I was really good at. And that really, the recruiting process really helped me just get comfortable with that because you have to. I mean, you talk to so many coaches, like you need to present yourself in a way that, a coach will want to recruit you. Because, personality plays a huge part in, a team's culture and all sorts of stuff like that. Like, a coach is committing $100,000 to you per year if you're at, a higher school, with scholarship money, clothing, food, supplements, all sorts of things like that. So they really got to believe in you as a person. And that was probably the number one thing I learned was just how to, humbly present yourself.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Um, yeah, I mean, like if you don't have that skill, then those conversations just fall so flat, and then you don't really get anywhere. And especially with, I will say, I think one of the unique parts is like I think that especially being JUCO, I feel like that is almost more important maybe in some sense, and like
Yeah, no, it
JUCO
is.
guys often have the stigma of like being just a terrible character, like absolute like character risk, locker room risk for bringing in.
Mhm.
Obviously, some programs build their programs off of JUCO guys and transfers more than others, but like that is kind of a big thing that if you can like prove that, hey, I'm not your normal JUCO guy that's got some character issues, got, had bad grades, throughout the whole time, and was like causing issues on my team and all this kind of stuff. That separates you a ton from other JUCO guys that they may be looking at, and they can at least know like, hey, if talent's equal, we're going to go with a guy that's just a better character fit too.
Yeah,
And that's
exactly.
definitely a really, really important point there. And I mean, obviously, you get that same benefit in high school, but it just might not be. I mean, it's still really a benefit in high school as well. It's just not like you. It's almost more dramatic in JUCO just because of that factor in there. Because
Yeah,
like in high school, like they're kind of just expected that you might be like a high school kid and you're still kind of
yeah,
just
16
developing
years old.
overall.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, we were both 16. I had no idea how to talk to an older person or
Yeah,
have those complex conversations. It's like such a new concept. So obviously you learn a lot throughout that time. But that's a really good point there. Um, you're obviously talking to like a lot of families right now. I mean, like you're a guy when it comes to recruiting stuff inside your first scholarship. Like, what do you feel like is some of like the mistakes that families make? Things to be aware of. Kind of insights that you feel like would be helpful.
yeah, it's a good question. I would say kind of what I just said too. Like a lot of guys don't really know how to talk to coaches, but more importantly, they don't understand. Their what they could what level they could play at. In relation to what they're looking for, and then really just how to market themselves just in general. Like understanding. The what you have to do on social media platforms with the X profile, keeping your film on there, knowing that every little thing matters, like what you post, the order in which it's posted, what is the caption that you have, like all those little things add up to the whole, profile of you. And that really is your recruiting profile nowadays, your X account. So that's what I would say. Just, making sure that every single person, has everything set up to a T. And, obviously, we're out here, helping guys with that, giving them captions for everything so they can just copy and paste it, telling them exactly, what order their post should be in, what to repost, what not to repost, their bio, and all sorts of things like that. But, some families are not as great at doing it on time as others. But that's what I would say would be, the number one thing I've seen.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely like the actions that we talk about in your first scholarship aren't necessarily like the most complicated or the most crazy, to be fair. Like it's not like we have like some
Hmm.
cracked
Yeah.
strategy that like doing all this crazy stuff. I mean, it's definitely is a lot and it's definitely works, but it's not like complicated by any means. And I think you hit on a good point of like it comes down to consistency. Like you can obviously take the action sometimes, but if you don't take them consistently, just like if you don't, work out consistently, like you're not going to see the results. Stuff doesn't just happen in one day. Like it's little things that stack over time.
Mhm.
It can also be little things that
Exactly.
hurt against you over time as well, which is all stuff
Hmm.
that is definitely true. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, no, for
Um,
sure.
yeah. Um, well, yeah, man. I guess really like it's been a blast getting to work with you and everything like that, and doing all that. So it's cool that we because obviously the last time we did this podcast was like uh I think you were the first. I would almost want to say you were the first episode. I feel like of the like when I was doing like hosted together podcasts,
Mhm.
and that was
It
at
was 2
least
years ago. It was my first
it had to be
semester at
like
Quincy.
it had to be over 2 years ago. It had to be like March or April of, or no, I think I was no. Okay, so I was moved into my place. It had to be summer, I think, of that time. So yeah, it's definitely been 2 years for sure. Yeah, crazy, crazy. And now you get to now you're here, and we're doing our thing, which is awesome. So super stoked for that. But yeah, I guess what again, like you've had a pretty crazy journey. Obviously, we had like somewhat similar paths to like kind of how we progressed through things. I mean, again, we roomed together for like a year, and we're in the same place for
Yeah.
a year and a half total, and we're good friends throughout the whole thing.
Mhm.
I mean, what were some of like the lessons and experience that you had during that time that you felt like were I guess just helpful for you overall because I know you kind of touched on like talking to like a boss and stuff like that, like kind of like life lessons that you learn throughout this process. I guess just overall, like just kind of taking your whole situation, like what do you think you learned from and really helped grow you as a person as well?
Yeah, I would say, the number one thing, towards the end of my process, my coach told me, don't act like don't act like a dime if you're only worth a nickel. And so that helped me, be a little bit more humble. And I learned that a lot of times, maybe I was a little more confident in myself than I needed to be. And so it hurt me in more than a few ways. But definitely just, learning to be humble throughout everything in life. Stay more even keel, don't be emotional up or down. And that's really just helped me through everything, through work, life, relationships, just everything along those lines. Just being a part of a brotherhood, it's nice to always know that, someone has your back. But really, when you battle with those guys, you develop more of a confidence in yourself, a humble confidence. And it definitely, just helps you go through life for sure.
Yeah, it's a good point. Definitely, I think a lot of people at our JUCO learned, hey, you think you're a dime, but you're only worth a nickel. I can
Yeah.
think of a couple of situations where people had that realization, and it's like it's you get a lot of humbling experiences in those moments with the staff that we had and just the situation that you had. Um, yeah, I think like one thing, and let's talk about JUCO for a little bit because I always just love to jam on JUCO. I don't get to talk about it enough, as you know. We don't. We work with some JUCO transfer guys in your first scholarship, but we don't work with as many as that maybe we would want to,
Yeah.
because obviously that's a fun experience. I mean, like we were talking about, like JUCO can be such a humbling experience for a lot of reasons. Some of the things I think is like obviously that there's so many people, especially first off, like a lot of people try to go JUCO, have those expectations of like really high. They think they're a dime. They think they're, 10 out of 10 player, don't even need to be here, whatever it is. Uh,
Yeah.
and then you realize that, hey, like everybody here is good. Like nobody here was a bench player at their high school. They were all like starters, one of the top players at their high school, got under recruited for some reason or whatever the reason was, ended up here and now like they're competing against you, and so like you can't just like lackadaisically do your thing, and still have to be that top performer there. So that's definitely a big thing that I think a lot of like kids realize, and they get there and they're like, oh shoot, I actually didn't want it that bad, and then they dip out or
Yeah.
whatever it is, fade into the
Mhm.
nights of Isla Vista or whatnot.
Yeah.
I think we saw plenty of those in our couple of years there, especially during
Oh, yeah.
COVID when it was just so easy to get lost in it all. So
Mhm.
um, I don't know if you had any thoughts on that at all.
Yeah, JUCO is a really unique place because you find guys from all different walks of life, all sorts of different situations. Like difference between me and you. Like me, I was immature. I didn't have the grades, so I ended up in JUCO. But you were on top of everything. You got a little bit under
Well,
recruited,
I don't know
and
about
so
that. You
you
don't need
wanted
to
to.
pump me up too much, but
Well, yeah, yeah, and, but you wanted to give yourself a chance, at playing at a higher level school. You went a few hours south, you're more guaranteed to play, your freshman, sophomore year when you go into JUCO than you are, at a university. And then you also, see some guys that they played big time football, came from a D1 school. They had something happen, personal issues that made them, a little bit emotional and they had to dial it out, leave college for a little bit, or guys that had injuries, or guys that got caught up with the law, or, things like that. Like you'll find it at all of that. Um, and so I think that's really cool that you meet all those different types of people. And then along with that too, there's some kids on a JUCO team that should not be playing college football. And then there's other kids on a JUCO team that are going to, Syracuse, UTEP, Idaho State, some of the guys that we played with. And so it's good. You get more of an appreciation for the different levels of football. Like I ended up going D2, you went NAIA. We had teammates that, went big time D1. You see all those, different skill levels, and then you also appreciate, how close everyone really is. Because if I look at you and I look at me, I think we're about the same, but we ended up at different schools. Same thing with those, the Syracuse guys. Like I went up against them every day. I thought I was better than them, and they went to a way better school than me. So it's just interesting, how all that plays out, and it really gives you appreciation for those smaller schools. And even when I was at D2, I came in very confident thinking that, I was going to be all American. I'm a starter. I played against all these guys. I'm going to be so good. And I hardly touched a field my junior year. So I played a lot my senior year, but it kind of gave me an appreciation, for, D2 school. That's really good football. And I was surrounded by guys that, every single one of them has that story where it's like, well, yeah, I should have went D1, but this happened. I should have went D1, but this happened. And that's the entire, starting lineup of a D2 football team. Like, and I would assume, Quincy is kind of a mid-level D2. I can only imagine, what the top schools are like. Like I know Grand Valley State, they had a guy, Jade Walker. Now he's playing for the Bears in the NFL. He made the 53-man roster. He's a wide out. He caught the game-winning touchdown for the Bears in the Kansas City preseason game. He went from Grand Valley to Texas A&M and then to the NFL. But you see all those stories and all those things in JUCO, and then you can kind of see how it relates beyond.
Percent. Yeah, it's funny. Like the question I've been asking the past couple of guys because they were all transfers from 4 year to 4 year was like comparison between division level, and the response they gave was like very similar to that. Was just like it's so close. Like it's not as close or it's not as far apart as everybody thinks it is. Like everybody thinks like, oh, the D3 guys are not even comparable to the D2 guys, or like that. It's just like an actual gap. When in reality, it very much like it kind of blends together to an extent of where like one guy I had on Will,
Yeah, it
he's over
does.
at yeah, and there's one guy I had on Will over at Boston College. He transferred from a D3 to Boston College, and he's on the two deep right now over at Boston College as a linebacker. And he's like, I
Wow.
can't say 100% this is a claim, but he's like, it, you if you're a starter at a D3, you probably could make the two deep at a D1 school. And it's like, I mean, of course, that may not be true across the entire line, but like, I mean, just him doing that as an example is like, illustrates how actual close it really is between the division levels. Because, I mean, like that is literally as drastic as it goes from D3. Maybe like you could count in some of the like lower level NIA schools that are pretty bad or pretty down there. Like maybe
Yeah.
that would be more drastic, but like you know going from a top D3 to power four is most people would be like, no way you can do that. Yet he did it, and it just shows like how close that talent actually is. And we've seen that like we again like you listed off some of the schools that guys went to at the JUCO that we were at, and it's
Uh-huh.
like definitely those guys were top performer on our team, no doubt.
Yeah.
Like they were dudes, and everybody knew that for sure.
Yeah.
But there's also guys that were relatively close to that, or guys. I mean, to be fair, there's guys that were on a roster that I think me and you would both agree, like, yeah, he probably could have gone D1 or probably should have gone D1, and then
Uh-huh.
didn't play for whatever reason, had another situation come up,
Mhm.
and missed out on an opportunity. And so like, there's also cases of that. There's really just so much talent out there, and it's crazy to see all that. And it's always hard to realize when like you're going through the high school process, or you just don't really have enough experience to kind of know what's actually out there, because there is just so much good football out there, really. Obviously, I didn't know about like Michigan football over there like until I met you, and then you started talking about some of it. And Michigan's got some good football over there
Oh, yeah.
near you over in Kalamazoo, and
Uh-huh.
obviously over in the Detroit area.
Yeah.
Obviously Bryce Underwood was is definitely putting it on for Michigan right now too.
Oh, yeah.
Um, there's a lot of good football all over the place, not just in California, Texas, Florida, Georgia.
Mhm.
There's a lot of good football all over the spot. You know, definitely in the college world, definitely is all over the place as well.
For sure. I know, Detroit, at least last time I checked, they had the most, NFL players from any city, that are currently
Really,
active right now. Yeah, Detroit was number 1, and it wasn't
you
even
always
really
love pulling up those stats.
You what?
You always love pulling up those stats, man.
Oh, yeah, no, I got them. Trust me. Everybody talked bad about Michigan, so I gotta back it up. But it definitely is, weighted towards, the east side, over in Detroit. Kalamazoo's alright. We got some players, like, we got Greg Jennings. He's about really the only one recently. Grand Rapids is pretty good. You got Muskegon, up north, there's a lot of guys. Yeah, it's definitely good football out here. It's pretty spread out, a lot more than, people would think, especially if you're coming from, Florida, California, really those hubs for players, based on, population size and stuff you'd never think about, a state like Michigan.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think we're at, I was just doing some tallies. We're up to 36 states of families that we've helped with so far. So we got 14 more to cross off. I think we're at 36 states in 4 countries, I think is what we're at, if I remember what I was looking at earlier. So we need a couple more states. We gotta get Alaska, gotta get a couple more. There's some good football in Alaska too. I had a guy on Morningside that was from Alaska. He was from Barrow, Alaska, the topmost part of Alaska, when they have that Bluetooth turf field. Really interesting to see that. That was when I realized, I was like, dude, you're from there. That's so random. But yeah, it was
Yeah,
a
that is.
slightly, yeah, going from Alaska to Iowa was an interesting way for sure. But yeah, a lot of good football all over the spot. So definitely glad you're putting it on for Michigan over there.
Yeah, I have to.
It's part of your job as a Michigan man.
Yes, sir.
Cool. So yeah, I mean, we've definitely gone around as far as like JUCO recruiting stuff. One thing I'd like to talk to you about, is obviously non-recruiting related, is training. Um, because obviously you dove pretty deep into like how to improve as an athlete, how to prepare accordingly for that. Especially, I would say, I mean, you were doing some stuff prior to the ACL tear, but then I feel like you went harder after the ACL tear, right? With a lot of the ATG stuff, correct?
Yeah, yeah. So, I always ran track in high school and I was really interested in that, just speed track. I just thought that stuff was cool. But I didn't really know much about it. And then, obviously got into college, gets more serious. You're doing a, dedicated strength training program. Then after that, I ran a fast 40-yard dash one time and it just totally piqued my interest. I became obsessed with all sorts of things related to that after that. And I, wanted to find whatever way possible to just completely maximize my potential. I think that matters. I think that's kind of what we're supposed to do as men, in life. You're just supposed to maximize your potential in whatever you do. So I wanted to do that. And then, yeah, I tear my ACL. So I want to make sure that I recover in the best way, mobility, strength through range of motion, all sorts of things like that are really important, especially at the receiver position. You watch guys like Calvin Ridley run routes, they're putting their body, in positions to achieve, maximal force in the correct way. Also to avoid injury, make sure you stay balanced, different things like that. So you have to have, certain levels of hip rotation, knee bend, ankle bend, and, in different weird areas, than, any normal human would. So that's important, like to actually train that. And that's, one of the main things I learned in JUCO was, I had deficiencies in certain parts like that. Like I was always good at the squat, bench press. I could run in a straight line really well, but I really gained the ability to do more change of direction things. And that helped a lot just in the weight room, just at home, like doing a lot of different, like not Pilates, but more like yoga, active yoga exercises and stuff, just to get my hips, up to par. Uh, and, one thing I learned, Olympic sprinters, their, hip flexor muscles are, way stronger than any other muscle compared to, your average athlete or your average human. So there's a lot of little muscles like that that, contribute to being an athlete for sure. And once I
100%.
found out, that sort of stuff, I really, really dove in.
Yeah, yeah, you went deep into it for sure. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, and it was obviously really helpful to you. I mean, you recovered pretty fast from the ACL injury, if I remember correctly. I mean, like,
Yeah.
uh, we're getting up to, pretty good. I know it took you some time. We were talking about the other day in terms of like how long it actually took you to get to 100%, but like you were
Yeah.
progressing pretty fast though for the most part.
Yeah, I did. I mean, I know 4.94 doesn't sound like much, but, you know, 5 months after surgery, barefoot, 4.940, that is actually pretty good. I was squatting pretty heavy. But yeah, I just the surgery I chose is like, the one that's most long term, so I don't have arthritis pain in the future, basically. So it takes they took out my quad, so it takes 2 years for that to fully, get back to strength, which it pretty much did. But I mean, even before then, I was still like after a year, I was able to play full football and be a good player. It's just there's that 10% that you miss out on when speed, just general athleticism.
Yeah, 100%. one thing actually that just popped in my head, and I'll probably go back to training after this, but obviously you went through that injury, and you tried out. I mean, how long was like when you did your little tryout in Santa Barbara? How long ago? How long after the surgery was that?
Was that for Quincy? You mean?
Yeah, for Quincy. Yeah, for Quincy.
Yeah, that was towards the end of our season. I believe that was in November. So that was about 10 months, 11 months.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, did the coaches ever talk to you about like? Because I think one thing that I'm just keeping in mind here is like, obviously injuries happen, and especially like ACL injuries are unfortunately, semi common in football, just non contact cutting so much. Um, did they ever talk about like thoughts on the injury with you, or like risk about the injury, stuff like that? Did they ever talk on any of that? Because I think that's an interesting thing is like, you still weren't necessarily like fully, if maybe you were fully cleared at that point or close to getting fully cleared or something like that. But like, you definitely weren't at 100%, like you said, and still were able to earn a pretty significant scholarship to a D2 program. Um, I mean, did they ever voice about like why they decided to offer you? What made them take you, even though they could take someone fully healthy or something like that?
Yeah, so they were an air raid offense, and I had become really fast, honestly. Like I could have ran track and competed for conference. So they knew that beforehand, and Coach Aiden vouched for me on that sort of thing. And I had like my old 40, 100-meter dash times to back that up. So they knew like where I was at pre-injury. And they liked me as a person, so they kind of believed in, my character, like we talked about earlier, the importance of that, presenting yourself. So they believed in me in that way that I would, be able to recover. And I was going to PT, at one of the best places in the nation, actually, where, DeAndre Ayton, Phoenix Suns player, he went there in Santa Barbara. One of my buddies, helped me get there. So they knew that, I talked with them a lot, and then, got on the field. I looked good. I mean, I got lucky that, we didn't have to do the workout on the turf because I would have had to run a 40. So I got lucky there because I wouldn't have ran, 4.5 like I used to, probably more 4.7, 4.8 at that time. Uh, they saw me run routes, I looked good, I looked healthy. And then, they project, I've got another 7 months, until the season, until we actually have to strap it up. So I thought they just believed in, me. They wanted to take a chance on me, and they thought I would be able to recover in time to be, full go by the season.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing all that. So, um, well, cool, man. I don't think, obviously we'll probably, I'll probably just have you on again because, you just, we pretty much just jam all the time. This is kind of what like our meetings look like anyway. So, but yeah, I appreciate you, man. And I'll let you go, enjoy your time in Michigan. Then you can get back to the better side of the country over in Palm Springs. But yeah, appreciate you coming on. Anything else you want to share or anything you want to shout out at all?
Yeah, I just want to say, appreciate Trent for, having me do this job. And, if any one of you are listening, we really care about you guys. You can kind of hear from my story, what I've been through. And, he was with me along the way. Like we see, the ups and downs of, what happens to you as a person through the recruiting process, the anxieties, the roadblocks that you have to break through. And we just want to help you out, as a person, get to where you want to go.
Yeah, 100%. And then if you sign up, you get a bonus of Coach Johnson's training, as he sometimes, sometimes we'll give you some insights into to certain recovery, mobility, and speed training
Yeah.
exercises. It's an added bonus. But cool, man. Well, yeah, again, appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you guys for watching. See you next one. Peace.